Hi everyone, I'm John from Tools in Action. Today I'm going to step you through this project that I just completed. This is a Cubs plaque that I made, cut out using an X-Carve machine, which if you don't know what X-Carve is, it's like a little CNC machine for the home. It's awesome. And after I got it all carved out, I've added a two-part epoxy that I dyed with some different colors. So take a look at the video. We're going to step you through everywhere from creating the design all the way through to the finishing product here. So stick around, and after I get done, I'm going to mail this out to my friend, Eric, and hopefully he likes it. Here we go. I'm starting this project out in Photoshop. I've already got it created. I didn't want to run around and waste your time with how I'm creating it in Photoshop. So we have it here. I'm going to save it as XYZ. Now I'm going to jump over to a website I use to convert from a JPEG to an SVG. So I'm going to pull this up, convert it to SVG. So it's all set to go here. I'm going to convert. This only takes a few seconds. From there we can download it, and here is our SVG. It's really large right here, but it's fine. We're going to resize it and easel. So now that we've got it, we're going to go into easel program, go to file, import SVG, and now we are going to find that one. It's right here. I'm going to have it leave it original size. You can see it's really large. It's way bigger than our area. So what I'm just going to do, pick a corner here. You can see there's a whole bunch of boxes. This is showing you every area that you could edit in easel. So, and we've got everything selected right now. So if I pull this one corner, it'll go down all together. You can highlight just individual sections with your clicker. But if you take the whole item and engulf it, it'll go ahead and let you select everything. Let's go over here and change the dimensions of our project. 12 inches wide by 15 inches tall by 1 inch thick. This is going to tell us, there's our work area right there. We are going to go with soft maple and 1/8 inch bit. Alright, so right now you can see this isn't going to fit in the area. Make it a little bit smaller. And I'm going to go up here to edit centered material. So this is showing us what it should look like if it cuts all the way through. Now I don't like to cut mine all the way through on these projects because we're going to be filling them with epoxy. So usually 0.2-ish is right around where I go. So you can see here, this is what our project should look like by the end. I love to be able to turn this thing around because what I was worried about is the text letters here. Sometimes your drill bit can't quite get in here to finish off some of these A's or B's. And it's going to show you here with the B and the S is going to be a little tricky because there's not going to be much material left there. I'm going to chance it and see how it turns out. So right now we are set up, centered, and we have this thing over here called cut settings. We'll take a look at our cut settings. Here is your feed rate, your plunge rate, and your depth per pass. This is values that X-Carve came up with, and you can change it. I found it to be pretty simple to adjust my feed rate and depth rate a little bit and tweak them, and the machine still does fine. Because right now, if you see this image, we can hit simulate, and it's going to tell us how long it takes to cut this out. Right over here is like 4 hours and 48 minutes. That's a long time to have your dust collection running or your router running, because you know it's a brushed router and you're going to wear your brushes out. So I am safe at feed rates of, I believe, right around 40, and the depth at 0.04. Let's try this. We just dropped it down to 2 hours and 34 minutes. So again, my custom rates right here, 40 inches per minute and 0.04 inches per depth of a pass. let's see what it does here with 45. 2 hours and 18 minutes. We're going to go with that setting. I've done this on this material before, so I'm pretty familiar with it. Again, we have the fill option picked out, which is going to carve everything out that was black. So now it's gray. If you do outline, it's going to pretty much reverse it, and this is what it would look like outlined. So you're going to have like a little line all the way around. These will be cut out. Cubs will be cut out. So not a big fan of that look, so we're going to go with fill. It's going to work better with your epoxy. So at this point, we head over to carve. Oops, I don't have my machine set up. So let me go turn the machine on and we'll come back. Alright, now that we're set, hit the carve button. And it's going to go through a series of questions. It's going to ask you the right thickness. Yes, I got my right thickness. Make sure it's held down in place. Yep, we're good there. Now, I'm using a 1/8 inch straight cut bit. So I've got that selected. Confirm bit. Now lower the machine to the lower left corner. Handle this by clicking these values and moving it around. I can also change the amount that I'm moving it up and down. Usually start off with 0.1 inch. Big tip here. Don't go ahead and put 4 inches on here and then you're going to forget about it. This is one of the spots that can get you into a little bit of trouble and wreck your project or damage your machine. So I've had some issues here before where I've been in a hurry. I changed this to 4, then I push the down button. Instead of being 0.4 inches, it go down 4 inches. And it's going to continue to travel until something breaks or you shut it down. Now with this new instrument, the emergency stop button is perfect for something like that. Little inattention to detail can cause some problems, so you got to be paying attention to what you do here. So once we get our home position confirmed, now we raise a bit, turn the spindle on, and then hit carve, and then we're working. After we take our piece off the X-Carve table, I like to give it round over edges. So right here I'm using a routing table with a 3/8 inch round over bit. And we're just going to hit each edge before we go to the sanding step. Right here I'm just sanding over the edges. We used our router bit to round it over, and this just gives it a nice finish. I'm using 220 grit here. Of course we can't forget to sand the rest of this project as well. So again, we're using 220 grit. After sanding this X-Carve project, I like to move to a step that people don't usually do. Matter of fact, I don't know anybody else who does this, but I like to add some color and some pizzazz and some pop to this. And instead of using a stain or a gel or just about anything else, I like to take it and act like a cutting board, especially this spalted maple. Spalted maple really has some good characteristics in it, and there's a lot of colors and a lot of movements of the grains you can see by using mineral oil. It's kind of like a cutting board, only we don't care if it stays moist. We just want it to bring out the color. This right now has been in for about a half an hour, and I plan to leave it overnight. And from there I'm going to take it out and dry it, and then let it air dry for about a week. This is going to allow any of the seepage to be gone, and it'll be fairly dry to the touch. So after that, then we're going to seal it with a polyacrylic or polyurethane, and that way the color stays. Matter of fact, once you've put the mineral oil to it, the color won't change, but the polyacrylic or polyurethane is going to make it a glossier finish. This is something I did the same way a few years ago, and I was able to take it from about the same color wood as the other one to this dark and really high characteristic patterns and changes in colors, and then you can really see the lines where the fungus was doing its work. And then once you coat it, it keeps it nice and smooth and shiny. On the back side, I did not. I left that plain, so it's dull finish, and the polyurethane and polyacrylic is really just to give it a shiny, glossy coat. And So that's what we're going to do with this one. Leave it overnight. We'll come back and see how much it darkens up, and then we'll go from there. Okay, a little catching up. When I put this in the mineral oil on the last clip, I believe I said I was going to leave it in overnight. Well, I only actually left it in about 6 to 8 hours into the oil bath, just because I'd hit the color I wanted to, and unlike cutting boards, I don't need to soak it all the way through. So I pulled it out. I was pretty happy with the color here. And so now what we're going to do is I'm going to seal this with my polyacrylic semi-gloss clear. I like using this product especially right now because it dries fast. It'll give me a nice shine on this one. You could use polyurethane, you can use just about anything else, but I like sealing the board before I step onto the next step where I fill everything with colored epoxy. I've done it both ways, but if I go ahead and put the polyacrylic on first, it's easier to clean up any epoxy that drips on there by mistake. And if you put the epoxy on first and you switch over to the polyacrylic as the next step, if you get any polyacrylic on the epoxy, it kind of smudges and doesn't look right. So I get this out of the way first and go to my epoxy last. So right now what I'm going to do is coat this with polyacrylic. We're going to put on about 3 coats. After the second one, I will do a 220 grit light sanding to get any bumps and ripples off of this. Anything that might catch, because I want the smoothest surface possible. So we'll sand with 220, and then we'll put another third, maybe even a 4th coat on. Alright guys, we've got the project carved out. We've got a coat of polyacrylic on it to protect it. And now we're going to do the fun part. We're going to actually give this its color. We're going to take an epoxy and with a paint dye, and we're going to make some colors up and fill this board in. What we got over here is some epoxy resin and hardener from West System. Great epoxy. I know there's a lot out there. This is what I use. I really like it. Another nice thing is they have little pump handles on the top here. So when you mix your epoxy and your hardener, you one pump to one pump. They're different volumes. I believe this is 3 times as much as this one, but with having the pumps, it takes all the guesswork out of it. We also have some disposable bowls here, which is what we're going to use to mix up our epoxy. We've got our red, white, and blue paint to dye the paint color. You can also use like RIT fabric dye for like tie-dye shirts. I've used that before. That's really cool. Not solid color effect. You can actually see through it, but we're not going to do that on this project. A couple stir sticks and our propane little torch. So trying something a little different now. You can see we've got a GoPro camera here. There's also another one in the ceiling, so we are going to get different views of this as we go along. Just trying to see how this works out. Anything to make this experience a little better. So first off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the CUBS for Cubs. We're going to fill that in with, that is red, and the outside circle is blue. So let's mix up our red first. We should probably only need, 1, maybe 2. We're going to go with 2 pump strokes just to make sure we got enough. Little trick if you ever use this stuff, when you're done pumping, turn the handle around. That way it doesn't drip on your table. 2 pumps, turn it around. So now what we're going to do is add our red. We'll add a little bit to start off with, and you just keep adding it until you get the color you want. Now, once you add the 2-part hardener here, or the 2 parts, epoxy and the hardener, you do need to stir this for a while so it gets a good mix. I don't remember what the time is. I want to say it's like a minute or so, but you can tell we're not using a high volume here, and it mixes really quick. Actually, I think I like that red. I think that's a little bit more. Alright, we're all mixed up. I like to reuse these stir sticks, so I've got a paper towel over here and I just wipe it off while it's wet and it stays, and I can reuse it. Alright, now with this hardener, I believe you've got, this is a long cure time on this, so we don't have to hustle. I don't remember how long this is. I apologize for that. Now I have some little stoppers here, that little pipette bulbs that work out really nice for transferring this into the smaller areas. When I get to the white, I'm just going to go ahead and pour. But I want to try to keep it in the center section without making a mess. Probably could have went with one single pump rather than two. Now I don't fill this right up to the top. You could, but I like to leave a little bit, keep it recessed. Ooh, I spilled a little bit over. Okay, the stuff cleans up. This is one of the reasons why I like coating it first with your polyacrylic. It's because if you make a mistake or you have a dribble, it wipes right off. It doesn't soak into the wood at all. Alright, got those little flecks out. Now you may see there's a couple bubbles and they're going to start forming in a little bit. And this is whatever air was trapped in it is trying to get out. We're going to take care of that with the torch in a little bit, but I want to pour everything first. In fact, you can see I added a couple bubbles to it by mistake, but that's not a big deal. Alright, we're set with the red. It's not a perfect B&S. Those little pieces got broken off during carving, but we'll make do. It's still going to look good. Alright, now we're going to go to blue. We use two pump strokes again. Plenty of blue. Now, West System has a publication that comes out, I want to say quarterly. It's not monthly. And in there's always tips and tricks and all kinds of stuff you can do with their items. All you got to do is go to their website and sign up for it. They'll send you the magazine right in the mail. And when I was looking at back issues, you can go look at all the back issues. So I was looking at dyeing the epoxy, and I found an article on it, and they did a bunch of tests to find out how much you can add without affecting the ability of the epoxy to work. And I want to say it was, again, apologize, I can't remember, getting old. I want to think it was something like you have to be less than 5% or less than 10%, and your epoxy will still work. I haven't had a problem with it at all. Everything I've added, I just do it by eye, and I've had not an issue with it. Everything turns out nice and hard and sets right up. I cut the tips of these pipettes so it comes out kind of fast, and I got to watch that I don't spread it over to another section. Gets a chance to see my shaky hand at work. Oh crap, I had a little bit go over into the red. That's what I was trying to avoid. We'll be able to cover that up with just a little bit more red topping it off. Our last little section of white is going to go smooth. We're just going to pour that in there and it will flow to where it needs to go. And to tell you, I was a little nervous when I started working with epoxy for the first time. Thought it was going to be difficult, and found out it's really not. It's actually a lot of fun. And I played around with using, like I said, powdered dyes to change the color, which worked awesome. The problem is you can't find a lot of colors. You find a lot of basic colors, and that's about it. Then I tried using crayons, grinding those up. That didn't work so good because it doesn't dissolve at all. It just kind of sits there. And paints. I've used a lot of acrylic paints, model paint. And you can even use some of that model paint with glitter if you're into that. Alright, we were able to cover up that little mistake. Now we're going to move on to the last step. We're going to get the white in there. After that's all in, we're going to hit it with the torch. So this one I'm going to go with, since I don't want to mix colors, I want to make sure I get it right the first time. I'm going to go with a good 5 strokes each with this. I'm guessing. In case you're wondering, this is the same product that I did to cover my workbench in a couple years ago. And I couldn't be happier with how this has turned out. It's taken some beating, it's a little dinged up, but you can take this and I could recoat it. After I give it a little rough up with sanding paper, I could recoat it, it would be just like brand new, but I'm not to the point that I have to worry about it yet. Alright, let's mix up the white here. White is one of those colors that you can actually affect it. Like right now it looks a little pearlish, and if I add some more paint to it, it's going to get a lot more solid white. Alright, got a good mix up on it. All the paint spread well. Now comes the pour time. The whole thing's not going to get poured, but we're going to pour a lot of it. A lot of grooves in this thing, a lot of places it's got to work into, so after I pour it, I'm going to have to help it around. Now you can see we've got bubbles formed on here, and we're going to take care of this by heating the surface of this. So you don't want to burn it. We just want to take the torch and get above the surface and heat the air above that. And that will lessen the surface tension of this epoxy and allow the air to escape. I set my torch really low, and this is not the easiest one to keep adjusted, so it's kind of cool. They just pop and go away. Now, you could quit after one time around with this, but after you hit it with the torch, you'll still have some bubbles coming to the surface. So at that point, it's time to hit it again. Now, the trick here is you don't wait too long. I mean, you don't do this for too long. I had one of the projects where I was taking the torch on it, and it was oak. I don't recommend this on oak without sealing it first. There's a lot of air pockets in oak, and it will come to the surface and keep coming to the surface. And as I was torching it, it got harder and harder, and it got farther along in the process, and next thing you know, it's melting. So it really damaged the project, and I'm still trying to recover it. All right. See a little you might not be able to see these, but right on the surface here, there are some bubbles, and they're going to continue to get a little bit larger. So I'm going to go ahead and attack them now where they're small. Got to be careful with this too, because since you finish the surface of polyacrylic, it gets too hot on the polyacrylic, it's going to damage it also. So you want to go quick, just hit the surface and try to stay off the wood if you can. Right now it looks pretty good. I'm going to let it sit here for a while, maybe hit it with a torch 1 or 2 more times, and then we're going to wait for this to harden up overnight. And after that, it's going to be the last step. We're just going to basically put on the hanger on this, and you don't have to if you don't want to. This is an option that you may want to skip, but this is going to be a wall hanger, so I'm going to put a clip on the back. So I'm going to wait till this dries and we'll come back. Well, I let the epoxy settle and harden overnight, and so here's our final product with the Chicago Cubs board. All my colors turned out pretty good. The nice thing about this epoxy that I kind of like is it shrinks a little bit when it dries and cures. So wherever it touches an edge of the wood, it likes to cup and sinks down in there, just like you would with a glass of water, meniscus from a glass of water. So that hardens that way, and you can actually see it gives it a little depth. So I also wanted to show you, that's with the solid colors. Here's a board I did last night that also has epoxy, but with that RIT fabric dye. And I wanted to show you kind of the difference here of, you can see in that RIT one, it's transparent. You can see the green on the bottom, but it's fairly transparent. So you can still see some of the wood grain. It kind of gives it a nice contrast between the solid color. But with the Chicago Cub ones, I couldn't find the blue and the red to match as well as I could the solid paint. So I just stuck with solid. Found out some more information on the resin. I looked a little harder last night, and on the back of this jug it tells me the cure time and work times with this special hardener, the 207. We had a 20 to 26 minutes to actually work with it pot time. 120 minutes that it'll actually still move, and 10 to 15 hours for it to become cured and solid. So that's why we go overnight with this. They have some other hardeners here, 205, 206, and 209, and they have different work times and hardening times. There's a fast, a slow, and an extra slow cure. And you can have it totally cured with the fast 6 to 8 hours, and it's 9 minutes work time. So depending on the application, you want to make sure you match your hardener to what you want to do. That's my little spiel on that. So now our next step is to put a hanger on the back of this. You can be finished with this if you want, but if you want it to be a wall hanger, we have to find a way to do it. So what we're going to do is turn our board over, and I have these little hangers that I got off of Amazon. They're like keyhole slots. So they just sit in your board. You put a screw in the wall and then it slides over. But what you have to do is put the recess in the board for the screw head to work. So really simple. All I do is find the center of my board, which is approximately 6 1/8. Take my 1/2 inch Forstner bit, and I will drill some recesses. I usually do 2, one stacked on top of the other. It doesn't have to be too deep, and then I'll clear it out in the middle. Alright, now we just take our little cover plate here and screw it on. It's really that simple. This is the most effective way of hanging that I've found. Make sure you turn that the right way. There is an upside and a downside to these. And that's it. This one's ready for hanging. I'm going to do the same to the Chicago Cubs board, and then we'll be done. So if you've got an X-Carve and you're looking for a way to spice up your projects, try some colored epoxy and see what you can come up with. Everybody I've made these for has absolutely fell in love with them. So the votes are in, and it's a positive. So hopefully this helps you out a little bit, or gives you an idea if you got an X-Carve. And until next time, I'm John. Talk to you later.
Remember, for more exciting tool action, go to toolsinaction.com.